Hi guys. Okay, I just wanted to make a short video to show you how I access some of the materials in Science A to Z and discuss how I would use them in my intermediate EL class to teach literacy skills along with science content vocabulary. So first thing, you'll go into Science A to Z with your account. Um, Over here on resources, you can see that it's got lots of different science topics. So when I was teaching my intermediate English, it was with eighth grade intermediate EL students. And so their focus, they're tested on everything, all of the sciences from sixth grade, seventh, and eighth on the SOL. But in the actual class, they're looking at atoms and more of kind of like the chemistry basis, just so if you're not familiar with that. So in my class, I would try to take topics that they were learning in their science class and reinforce them in the literacy class as well as teaching them literacy skills. So my students being intermediate usually could work on the third to fourth grade. They could do the fifth to sixth grade if it was at the lower level. But let's just start with solids, liquids, and gases. Just for sake, this is something that all students need to know, no matter what science they're learning. They need to have that foundation of solids, liquids, and gases. So, first of all, anytime you see this planet sign that says assign, you can assign this the whole unit to students that you've set up in your Science A to Z class, your RAS Plus class. Um, they also have, your unit guide explaining how you could teach this as a full unit. I'm going to share what I did for in my class. So, first of all, let me zoom out a little so you can see a little more. Within the nonfiction books, they've got low, mid, and high. I use these for my guided reading groups. So, my other students were maybe working on Imagine Learning, or maybe they were working on RAS Plus assignments that I've given them, or having free read in RAS Plus, or maybe working on a Newsella assignment that I've given them. I would pull groups of 2 to 3, sometimes 4. It depends on how many students you have in the class, and I'd pull them based on whether they were low, middle, or high. The cool thing about this is if you give them the books to read, the front cover looks exactly the same. The only difference is the number of dots up here in the corner. So if there's one dot, it's low. If there's two, it's middle. And if there's three, it's high. So we as teachers know that they're the different levels. But if you were to just lay this book on all of your students' desks, the other students wouldn't know that there was any difference. So especially when you're dealing with older students, sometimes there can be an embarrassment level if they're not reading quite as high as somebody else in their room. So that's kind of how I worked it. You actually can print these out. And when you print them, I would do the double-sided book, or you can just use the digital copy of it. And then as a teacher, you also can display it. So, when I was doing this, it was pre-pandemic, so I would print it out so that each of my students had their own book because then they could take it home. But now that all of our students have their own Chromebooks, they could just pull it up on their Chromebook and their RAS Plus account. You could assign this book to them, they could pull it up, and then you guys could read it together digitally. So either way, it's going to work. The nice thing about these is you can also focus on text features. What is the table of contents? It's got the important information. It's going to tell me where to find that information. It has a glossary. It has an index. The glossary is going to highlight the bold words and what the definitions are. The index is going to tell me where I can look up specific information. So you can cover these, text features with them. There's a graphic, and that way they also can learn those things as well, because as they're progressing through, it's important to know those text features so that they can find information themselves when they're doing research or reading on a topic in other classes. So that's kind of what the book looks like. So I'm just going to go back. There is a book quiz with this, and the way I would set up my week is with my guided reading. The first day I would read the book to them and they would follow along, and I would point out things and I'd stop and ask questions. Day 2, we would take turns reading. I would read a page, and then each student would read a page, and we would just keep rotating to try to get through the whole book. And then the third day, just the students would read. So I'd have them take turns. And then on Thursday is when I would have them just read the book on their own. So they wouldn't necessarily, they could sit with me in a guided reading and then I could ask some questions after, or this could be their independent practice when they're not with me to sit and read. And then when they're with me in the guided reading group, maybe I'm working on word work or working on vocabulary or something like that. And then on Friday, I would give them the book quiz, but I wanted them to use the book. Like it wasn't just do this from your brain. It was a go back and find the answers. I want you to tell me what page number you found the answer to this because it's teaching them that reading skill of going back to the story to find the answer, which again in science you wouldn't necessarily do. They just have to recall, right, and know that answer. But again, this was an intermediate English class. I just was using science to teach my literacy skills. So when they're taking that reading SOL, we want them to go back in the story and find that information. So on Friday, they knew they had a book quiz, but they knew that quiz, they were to go back into the book and they had to actually put the page number where they found the answer, or the section that they found the answer. Now, if it was an inferencing one, they would, for my kids, they would just put brain or inference, but they knew that I was not going to accept them to just put brain on every single one because I wanted them to go back and find the proof in the text. Um, that's kind of how I would run my guided reading group. For some of the independent work for them to do, there are other focus books that you can assign to the students in their RAS Plus. You can see it's got the little planet down here for assign, and then you could assign that to different students based on their level. So they've got low, and then they've got several middle, and then they've got a high. So based on whatever level your students are, you could assign them those books. And then I also really like the iFiles because they're short. Let me pull one up just so that you can kind of see what it looks like. So the iFiles, lots of graphics, lots of things for them to understand, and not a whole lot of text. So that way they can, kind of read it and reread it and be able to get the information. And usually the topics are pretty interesting to the students. And again, those are on different levels, low, middle, and high. The mystery file we would usually do as a group as kind of a warm up because it's mercury is something that can be a solid or a liquid, and so kind of reading it through and then kind of problem solving together because again, they may not quite have the language to be able to do this all on their own. So, but it's a fun activity to do as a class to really read and think, and it's a great way to get your speaking in to the class to have them discuss, what are you thinking? Why do you think it's this way? And so that way we're getting in that listening and speaking as well. There are debates in here. I didn't personally usually use the debates. I usually use the mystery file to do my speaking portion of it, but the debates would be another great way for you to do that. There also are videos in here that you could assign to the students to watch when they're in their independent time, or even when they're in their study hall or resource to watch. And then the other cool thing is career files so that they can look at, okay, what job could I do with solids, liquids, and gases? And finally, the quick reads. And quick reads, a lot of times I would do like a running record on those so that I could kind of see how the students were doing. Now, you don't have to use these this way. You could just give this as another resource for them to read. You could use this for part of your guided reading groups. There are other areas where I can show you to get the guided reading, like running records and stuff that I'll discuss in a minute. But I just want to make sure you know all of the resources that are in Science A to Z. And then they'll also connect you to other books within Reading A to Z to help you with that. Graphic organizers, awesome for teaching those reading skills. And they also have science diagrams. And these science diagrams cover lots of different topics within science. So you just kind of have to look through them to see which ones that you find. I used to have my students put these in their notebooks, their interactive notebooks, so that they could refer back to them when they were learning about the different topics. There are games, there's vocabulary cards. I'm not super excited about the vocabulary part of learning A to Z. It's one of the ones I think isn't quite as good as other things. I think we can do better as EL teachers, but there are some. So that are good. So you'll just have to go in and look. And again, games I usually didn't do too much with that. If you come back up here to the top, I didn't show it at first because this is not in every science topic, but in some of the science topics, they have these interactive science lessons. So let me click on this one, which are pretty cool. And if you could hear that, that's incredibly loud, and I'm sorry if I just made you deaf. So, but these actually take them through step by step, and it speaks at an appropriate rate for our L's. So that's another activity that I would sometimes do with them on for their independent time. So lots of options. You've got Newsella, you've got Raz Plus where they can go in and you can give them assignments to read, or they can go in and do independent reading in their book room. You've got these interactive science lessons for some of the topics that you can assign them and have them work through. You also have videos that you can have them watch. So there's lots of different things. You've got I think I already said it, but you've got Newsella. So don't forget about Newsella. It's a great product too. Um, so that kind of shows you a little bit of what Science A to Z has to offer. And then, once you did the solids, liquids, and gases, you could go, move them up. Like, so, or actually, let me say this. Once you go through like the third and fourth grade topics, you could then try to push them a little further and move them to the fifth to sixth grade topics. And really just trying to get them to build their reading abilities through those small groups with support from you. So that was just a quick snapshot of what you can do with Science A to Z. I will show you if you assign something to them, what that looks like. So let me just assign this book to myself. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then if I log out of here, I can then go into my students. So if they click on the kids login, the very first time they come in here, they're going to have to put your username. Mine is Madkins26. Then they'll go into their name. I usually do first name, last initial. I also usually do the same picture password for all of them, but you can do a word password as well. And then once the student goes in there, if they come up here to science, oops, and they go to assignments, science assignment, there's the gases in your world. And when you assign it to them, I went too quickly, but when you assign it to them, you can decide if you want them to listen to the story, then read the story, and then take the quiz. Or like this water cycle one, I really just wanted them to read it. So you can assign exactly what you want them to do on each of them. I wasn't so much concerned about the quizzes in these books. It was more just to get them reading, 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 reading as much as possible. For my lower students, I always gave them the option to listen to it. For my students, I was trying to push a little bit more. Sometimes I would take that option to listen away and just have them try to read it. And then I would sometimes pull them aside and talk to them about the book. What was the book about? What were the main points? Can they tell me some of the text features in the book? Things like that, just to review with them. So again, that's kind of just a fast review of some of the things that you could use Science A to Z in order to do your reading groups. You also could do this if you have a self-contained science class using the Science A to Z, because that way you're teaching them science content, but you are also focusing on these literacy skills, because we want them reading, writing, speaking, listening all week, every week. So use these activities to plan your science classes as well, and do the guided reading, because the more they read, the faster they're going to grow in their English ability. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me via email.